In this video, I'm going to present you with one of those baffling cases in which no actual solution was arrived at. Indeed, as you will discover, one of the most baffling things about this case is trying to decide what the mystery actually was. Was it a murder, or was there some other explanation for what occurred? Once you have heard all the facts, I'm going to ask you, the viewers, to decide if this was a case of murder, and if it was, who you think may have been responsible. I should warn you that the details are pretty horrible, and some viewers might find the disclosures disturbing, so I do advise viewer discretion. That aside, let's get down to the strange case of the girl's body in the box. The mystery begins in January 1883 on this stretch of Goswell Road, just beyond the northern fringe of the City of London, where were located the headquarters of Carter, Patterson and Company, railway and general carriers, whose vans would transport parcels, packages and goods all over London, a bit like couriers such as DHL, UPS or Parcel Force do today. However, the story begins in the East End of London on the 11th of December 1882, here on Cambridge Heath Road, which at the time was known as Cambridge Road, situated a little over 2 miles from Goswell Road. Just after noon on the day in question, two men, one of them well dressed and wearing a dark coat and high hat, and the other attired as a labourer, brought a box to a branch receiving office of Carter, Patterson and Company, located at the shop of Davies and Evans on Cambridge Road. The labourer set the box down just inside the shop and went away. The other man lifted the package onto a soda cask and told the shop assistant, Edward Smith, that he wanted it delivered to an address in St. John's Wood. Smith asked for the sender's name, to which the man replied, Mr. Smith, although he didn't give an address. The box, which was described as a common deal box, measured about 2 feet long, 18 inches high, and about 18 or 20 inches in breadth. It was a rice starch box and bore the name and address of its manufacturer, Samuel Berger & Co., Starch Works, Leonard Street, Bromley by Bow. On top of the box was a small card bearing the address, Miss Green, number 24, Abbey Road, St. John's Wood, N.W. The man then left the shop and Edward Smith returned to his other duties. At 6 o'clock that evening, Carter, Patterson and Company's carman, James Doughty, arrived to collect that day's packages, and he took them to the firm's Mile End depot in Birbeck Street. At 7:45 p.m, the box was taken by another carrier to the company's headquarters at 128 Goswell Road, and at 8:30 it was taken to their Chalk Farm depot, where it remained overnight. The next morning, carman Stephen G. loaded it onto his van and set off to make that day's deliveries. He turned into Abbey Road at around 10 a.m. Abbey Road today is something of a tourist attraction, since it is the location of the Abbey Road recording studios and boasts the iconic pedestrian crossing over which the Beatles were photographed striding on the cover of their album Abbey Road. G headed along the thoroughfare and pulled up outside number 24. However, when he knocked on the door, he found that nobody by the name of Green lived there, nor was the name known at that address. Returning to his van, he continued with his deliveries and then took the box back to the depot and scrawled the words "Not Known" across the label. The box was returned to Carter, Patterson and Company's head office on Goswell Road, where it was placed in the open shed, or bank as it was known, on the loading bay, and a letter was sent to Miss Green at 24 Abbey Road, informing her that they had a box for her and would she please tell them when it would be convenient to deliver it. The next day, the letter was returned, marked Name Not Known. On December the 13th, a memo was sent to Mr. Hulbert, the manager of the Mile End depot, informing him that the name on the box received from Davies and Evans was not known at the address given, and asking him to make enquiries at the shop as to the sender. Hulbert sent the carman James Doughty to the shop, where the manager looked at the register and found that his assistant had written the name Smith, but no address had been taken down. Returning to the depot, Doughty reported, "Sender's address not known to agent." This was duly forwarded to head office. With no one to deliver the box to, and no one to return it to, it was left in Carter, Patterson and Company's bank over the Christmas period and on into the new year. On Thursday the 18th of January 1883, workers in the yard began to notice an extremely unpleasant odour that appeared to be emanating from the box, and William Stanton, the clerk at the misdirected parcels department, prized the lid off and found to his horror that it contained the badly decomposed body of a younger girl. Stanton called the manager, William Allen, over. Allen took one look inside the box and then hurried to nearby Old Street Police Station, where he told Acting Inspector William Davis of their discovery. Davis sent a constable to fetch Divisional Police Surgeon Dr. George Eugene Yarrow, and he and Sergeant Frank Bryers then made their way to the premises of Carter, Patterson and Company. Having examined the box and its contents, Davis ordered that it be taken to the police station, and here Dr. Yarrow, having conducted a cursory examination, pronounced the body to be that of a girl who was between 13 and 14 years of age. The body, he later stated, had been forced into the box, doubled upon itself twice, the back and head doubled upwards, the thighs doubled across the body, and then the legs again across the thighs, so as to form a compressed letter S. She was small for her age, being only 4 feet in height, and was a good-looking child with fair hair and excellent teeth, but her body was utterly emaciated, weighing just 24 pounds. Indeed, she was so thin that Dr. Yarrow was of the opinion that she had been starved, although he couldn't be certain about that until he had made a full post-mortem examination. The body was therefore taken to the St. Luke's Parish Mortuary in Warwick Court off Whitecross Street to await the post-mortem. By this time, word had gotten out about the discovery, and journalists were soon descending on Carter, Patterson and Company's premises to glean any information they could. Several of the workers who had seen the body were quoted in the papers as having opined that they considered it a wonder how the body had been squeezed into so small a box. For the police, the most important thing was to identify the girl, and if the following report, which appeared in Reynolds's newspaper on Sunday the 21st of January is to be believed, they had their work cut out. In the public statistics of last year, 25 girls were reported as missing in the metropolis, and of whom nothing had been heard. Though it is probable that some of these, who were older girls, had left home of their own accord, yet the police are now making what reference they can to see if any answer the description of the discovered girl. 2 girls in particular were being suggested in the press as possible contenders for the girl in the box. 14-year-old Mary Seward had disappeared on the 13th of April, 1881, when she had left her home in West Road, West Ham, at 6 p.m. to search for her 4-year-old nephew, who had gone missing earlier that day. Although the little boy was found and brought home by some children that evening, Mary was never seen again. Then on the 28th of January, 1882, 13-year-old Eliza Carter, who at the time was staying with a sister in West Road, the very street that Mary Seward had lived on, also disappeared. The next day, her dress was found in West Ham Park with all the buttons cut off, but just like Mary Seward before her, no trace of Eliza Carter was ever found. The consensus amongst the police and the press at the time of the disappearances was that the girls had been kidnapped by a trafficking gang who had smuggled them to the continent, where they had been put to work in a brothel in a European city. However, the finding of the girl's body in the box in Goswell Road suggested that the fate of one of the girls at least may have at last been ascertained, and their relatives were therefore contacted and asked to attend the mortuary to see if they could identify the body as being that of either child. As the police made their inquiries, Dr. Yarrow began his post-mortem. His findings were reported by Reynolds's newspaper on Sunday the 21st of January. He found an old but nearly healed ulcer on the right leg. The deceased had a fair complexion, light brown hair, and hazel eyes. Her teeth were in good order, but 2 had been removed, evidently by a medical man. Her ears were not pierced. She had a chemise on, but there was no mark on it. The deceased's brain was soft and decomposed, but there were other observations which might be made about it, which it was not advisable to make at present. The lungs were sound, the heart and liver natural, and the spleen, stomach, and kidneys were healthy. The stomach contained a little dark matter, and the blood was very thin to the point of being watery. By this time, the relatives and friends of Mary Seward and Eliza Carter had viewed the remains, but none of them could identify them as being those of either of the missing girls, although, as the Evening Standard pointed out, the features were quite unrecognizable through decomposition. With no positive identification forthcoming, the inquest respecting the death of a female unknown opened on Saturday the 20th of January, in the concert room of the Hope Music Hall on Banner Street, with Sir John Humphreys, the coroner for East Middlesex, presiding. According to the next day's edition of Lloyd's Weekly newspaper, the jury, having been sworn, proceeded to view the body, which lay in the parish mortuary in Whitecross Street, carefully laid within a glass-covered coffin to avoid any danger in viewing it. The corpse presented the most sickening spectacle, being nearly black, the eyes perfectly sunken in the head, and the features necessarily quite unrecognisable. The girl had evidently been dead many months. Close by was exhibited the box in which it was found. Small as was the body, it seemed almost impossible that the box could have contained it. The jury then returned to the Hope, where the first witness, Edward Smith, the assistant who had received the grisly package, proceeded to give details of the man who had brought it into the shop. Next up was the carman James Doughty, followed by William Allen and William Stanton, all of whom testified to the attempts to deliver the package and the events leading up to the body being found inside it. Then came Sergeant Frank Briers, who testified that he had made inquiries at 24 Abbey Road, but no Miss Green lived there, and the present occupants had been there for 7 years, and had no knowledge whatsoever of a Miss Green. The final witness was Dr. Yarrow, who repeated his findings from the postmortem examination, emphasising that the child was very thin, and he had found no fat whatsoever on the body. Regarding the girl's teeth, he said that the mouth contained a very good set of teeth, large and regular, and 4 had been removed, 2 in either jaw, evidently to make room for others, and evidently also by a professional man. In other words, it appeared that the child had for most of her life been well cared for. He could not give the cause of death, as there was not sufficient cause found in the organs. He had, however, sent the stomach for analysis to Dr. Charles Maymont Tidy, Professor of Chemistry and of Forensic Medicine at the London Hospital, as, although there was nothing to account for death, poison might have been used by slow process. The coroner then announced that, since the case could not be carried any further forward that day, as from Dr. Yarrow's evidence the cause of death might be poison, it would be best to await the results of Professor Tidy's analysis of the contents of the stomach. Inspector Peel, who had now taken charge of the police investigation, closed the proceedings by saying that the police were offering a reward for the man who carried the box to the carrier's office if he would come forward, as they believed he was just a porter who had been hired to transport the box there by Mr. Smith. And with that, Sir John Humphreys adjourned the inquest for 2 weeks. Although Dr. Yarrow had stressed that he couldn't ascertain the cause of death with any degree of certainty, the majority of the newspapers were in no doubt that a horrible murder had been committed. Reynolds's newspaper, in an opinion piece that began "Nothing but horrors," questioned how it was possible that the body of a big girl could be shuffled into a box and in the broadest daylight carried to a shop and left there. Over the next few weeks, several stories broke in the newspapers that appeared to herald a breakthrough in identifying the girl. The Eastern Evening News on Thursday the 1st of February was one of many newspapers that published details of another missing teenager who might be the girl in the box. Mrs. Farrell, an elderly person, lodging in Salisbury Square, Fleet Street, who has been to see the body at the mortuary, states that it much resembles that of Clara Sutton, a girl she had adopted from infancy. She has an excellent photograph taken a short time before Sutton's disappearance, and she has also some hair cut from her head. This hair in colour is flaxen, and scarcely distinguishable from the slightly auburn tinge of the hair cut from the head of the body found in the box. The girl, too, was 14 years of age, and was clean-looking and attractive. When between 12 and 13 years of age, she lived in service at Forest Gate. She left there, and then went to live on the Rokeby estate, West Ham, near West Ham Schools, where she got acquainted with Mary Seward, one of the missing girls. In August last, a woman who knew her and said she was from West Ham came to Mrs. Farrell's and said that, as she had heard the girl was out of a situation, she had got her a place at Mrs. Young's, Guildford Lodge, Brentwood. Mrs. Farrell had written to that address, but could not get either an answer or any tidings of the child. The Clara Sutton story was given extensive newspaper coverage until, on Friday the 2nd of February, the Echo revealed that The statement that the girl Clara Sutton had been missing from Salisbury Square, Fleet Street, and that she was strikingly similar to the girl whose body was found in the box is incorrect. The police authorities have received a letter from Mr. John Young of Ilford Bridge, Brentwood, stating that Sutton is now in his service. In early February, several newspapers were reporting on a shopkeeper in West Ham who had made what was being described as an extraordinary statement. The Bristol Mercury and Daily Post told the story thus. A woman who keeps a fancy shop at West Ham, near London, and who also has a registry office attached, has made the following extraordinary statement. She says,
"On the 5th of October last, a young girl came into my shop and asked if I could get her a situation. She was in very great distress and said she had run away from home because her father so beat her and ill-treated her that she could not stop in the house for fear of him since her mother's death, which had then recently taken place. She added, but her father had taken a place at a public house, and he wanted her to go there too, but she would not, as she sometimes had to run out of the house owing to his violence. I gave the girl an address to go to in Leighton, and the lady was so pleased with the girl's manner that she engaged her. The girl left the bundle of clothes she had brought from home and said she would go and tell them that she had got a situation. The girl, however, did not come back, nor go to her situation. A few days afterwards, a coarse-looking woman came for the clothes, stating that the girl's father would not allow her to go to a situation at all, and in order to prevent her from running away again, he had locked her in her room. I thought the woman meant the girl no good, so I refused to give up the clothes. The woman then went away, and the lady, finding the girl did not go to her situation, called at the shop to know the reason. We then wrote to the girl's address, and the woman came again and demanded the clothes, saying that the father had sent the girl to a home where she would not have a chance of running away again.
The shopkeeper gave journalists the girl's address, and they promptly headed there to investigate further. The Bristol Mercury and Daily Post reported that the neighbours said that it was quite true that the girl's mother had died a few months ago in the hospital, and that her father had been lodging at the address given, but had recently moved. The woman who kept the lodging in question said that the father rented a room there still, but that what he did she did not know. He, however, had been out of work for a long time. The whole surroundings of the place were that of squalor and wretchedness. She admitted he had 1 or 2 girls, but she said she did not know anything about them. It is a curious coincidence that the home where the girl lived is in a small little street at the back of the parcel office where the box and the body were taken. It would appear that the police did succeed in tracing and interviewing the girl's father, albeit if the following report from the St. James's Gazette, dated the 1st of February, is to be believed, the interview did little to solve the mystery of the girl's whereabouts. A police sergeant had an interview yesterday with the father of the girl referred to by the woman who keeps the registry office at West Ham and who was prevented by her relatives from going to a situation at Leighton. The father admits the truth of the statement, but says that she was prevented from going to the situation because she had to go and live with her aunt. He says she is 16 years of age and that she has been a source of anxiety and trouble to him. Neither has he any reason to doubt that she is alive and well cared for. He could not then give the address at which the girl was living, but said he would ascertain it. It seems odd that the police, if the newspapers are correct, appear to have taken the father's word for it that the girl was alive and well, and I can only conclude that they did follow his statement up and ascertained that no harm had come to the girl. On Sunday the 4th of February, Lloyd's Weekly newspaper reported that a witness had come forward who may well have seen and spoken to the man who sent the package as he was taking it to Davies and Evans's shop. Yesterday, a respectable working man, residing near the shop where the parcel box containing the body was booked and who has given his name and address to the police, made the following statement.
One day in the second week in December, I believe it was Monday the 11th, I was standing talking to one of my mates in the Cambridge Heath Road at the corner of Mile End Road. It was between 12 noon and 1 o'clock when a man who was wheeling a laundress's barrow with a box upon it covered with some American oilcloth put the barrow down and come onto the footpath to us and said, "Can you tell me where there is a parcels receiving office about here?" I said, "I don't know, but I think there's one up the street." I asked my mate if he knew of one, and he said no. At that moment, one of the district postmen was passing, and I said, "That man will show you." I then spoke to the postman myself and said, "This man wants to know where there's a parcel receiving office. Can you tell him?" The postman replied, "Well, the nearest is Carter Patterson & Co.'s office at Davison Evans's shop by the Bethnal Green Museum." The man then went into the road and, taking hold of the barrow again, he wheeled it in that direction. The man who wheeled the barrow was a tall young man without beard or moustache. I am certain that I should know him again, as we were talking for several minutes, and I had a good look at him. He was dressed in a tight-fitting white overall, such as are worn by painters' labourers or labourers to engineers. There was another man walking by the side of the barrow who appeared to be with him. The man who wheeled the barrow had a tight-fitting cap.
The inquest reconvened on Monday the 5th of February, but since the professor had still not completed his analysis, it was adjourned again, this time until the 13th of February. On the 13th, with the professor's findings now in, Sir John Humphreys took his seat, and the final day of the inquest got under way. The first witness was Mary Jane Green, whose evidence was, to say the least, short and to the point.
I am an unmarried woman and live at 3 Abbey Road, St. John's Wood. I have lived there 4 years. I have heard of a box being found with a body in it, but I know nothing of it. I have never had a child and know no one of my name in Abbey Road who has had one. I know no circumstances that would cause anyone to send the child to me.
The next witness was Mrs. Susanna Bentley, who lived at the house to which the box had been addressed, and she seemed somewhat nonplussed to have been dragged into the spotlight.
I am a married woman and live at 24 Abbey Road, St. John's Wood. I have heard of a box being addressed to my house, but know no reason why it should have been sent there. I have lived there since March 1876, and during that time I've had no servant of the name of Green.
Have you ever had a servant with the name of Green?
I had one of that name about 17 or 18 years ago, but not at Abbey Road. I kept up no communication with that servant, and know no one who has.
The next witness was Mr. William Bentley, who was equally mystified as to why the gruesome artefact should have been addressed to his house.
I am a silk merchant and the husband of the last witness. I was living at number 4 Cavendish Road, St. John's Wood, when we had a female servant of the name of Green for a short time. I do not know where she went after leaving our service and have not seen or heard from her since.
Do you know whether she gave birth to a child at all?
No. Cavendish Road is a short distance from the Abbey Road. I can suggest no reason why the box and its contents should have been sent to my house.
Professor Tidy was the next witness called. He testified that the stomach presented an unusually contracted appearance, and that he himself should have judged it to have been that of a child no more than 8 or 9 years old at most. He had carefully examined the stomach for any traces of poison, and had found minute traces of morphia, the active principle of opium. He was, however, unable to state positively whether the drug was given as morphia or as opium. He was of the opinion that the child would have taken but very little nourishment for some time before her death, but whether this was dependent on her inability to take food or on her inability to get food, he had no facts to guide him. That a dose of morphia, either as morphia or as laudanum, or in the form of one or other of the many soothing syrups and medicines widely available, had been administered to the child within a comparatively short period of her death, he was in no doubt, but considering the small quantity he found on analysis, a quantity that per se would probably be insufficient to kill, although on this he spoke with reserve considering the condition of the child, he was unable to say whether the morphia was administered with criminal intent or with a proper object for medicinal purposes. In conclusion, he stated that, in his judgment, death had been due to one of 3 causes. 1. Deprivation of food. 2. Poisoning by morphia. 3. A combination of both causes. Dr. Yarrow was then recalled and stated that the child had not been violated. Having heard the result of the analysis by Professor Tidy, he believed that death was caused by privation, accelerated by a dose of morphia. He could not say the intent with which the morphia was given. A further examination of the body showed a bruise on the right cheek, extending down to the bone, caused by either a blow or fall during life. Asked by the coroner if he had found sufficient organic disease to account for death, the doctor replied, "None whatever." The coroner pressed him further. So far as you can proffer an opinion, do you think the privation was from the body being unable to take nourishment or from nourishment not being given to the child? I should think from food being withheld, was the doctor's reply. That I judge from the absence of anything in the intestines and upper part of the stomach, and from the fact that the lower portion of the stomach contained a black fluid, such as is found in cases of absolute starvation, like where men have been locked up in mines. And with that, the doctor's evidence concluded, and the coroner, Sir John Humphreys, then began his summing up.
The cause of death was, no doubt, deprivation of food, but whether the child could not take food, or whether food was withheld from it, is not clear. Or perhaps death might be from poisoning by morphia, or a combination of causes. Dr. Yarrow has given his opinion that death was caused by privation, accelerated by a dose of morphia. You all know very well that many soothing syrups are sold, all containing opium or morphia in some form or another, and therefore it might have been administered either innocently or with a criminal intent. Of that there is no evidence, so perhaps the best form for your verdict would be to make it of an open character.
The jury consulted together for a few minutes and then returned a verdict to the following effect: that the child was found dead in a box, that the death was due to privation combined with having taken and swallowed down a dose of morphia. But under what circumstances the said privation was brought about, and under what circumstances the morphia was administered, there is no evidence to prove. The jury further recommended that a reward should be offered with a view to the discovery of the sender of the box. Inspector Peel said he would report the recommendation to the authorities. And with that, the case petered out. As far as I can ascertain, the mystery of the girl's identity was never resolved. Hers is just one of the many cases that went cold for lack of clues or evidence. That the girl had suffered from horrendous neglect seems certain, and her final days and moments must have been spent in absolute torment. Her case raises so many questions. Why did the mysterious Mr. Smith risk transporting the body through busy streets to a parcel office where, had the assistant been more curious, it could have been found there and then? Why not dispose of it nefariously, either by burying it or dropping it into the River Thames? Why send the remains to a house in Abbey Road and address it to someone who neither lived there nor was known to those who did live there? Did the police really accept the word of the girl's father, mentioned with regard to the woman who kept the registry shop at West Ham, that, although he couldn't give the address at which his daughter was supposedly living, he would get it for them, and did they follow this up in order to ascertain the veracity of what he had told them? And finally, of course, there is the poor girl herself. Who was she, and how did she come to be in the dreadful situation in which she found herself during her final months, weeks, and days? There can be little doubt that her final moments were spent in torment. As the Graphic put it on Saturday the 10th of February, the imagination shrinks from attempting to reconstruct the history of the poor child whose body was lately found in a starch box. That she was murdered seems certain. That she was murdered with circumstances of great cruelty seems probable. Worse than all, as no one has missed this girl, as no search was made for her, as no one has recognized her, it is a natural inference that she was destroyed by the people who knew her best and ought most to have cherished her. Anyway, you've heard all the evidence, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. Perhaps you've spotted something that I've missed. Thanks for watching, and until my next true crime tale, stay safe.